It's my distinct privilege and pleasure to introduce our 59th president. I have no disclosures other than the fact that I've known Walter since our early days when we were both at the NIH. As much as I've always liked Walter and followed his career with interest, I'm thankful to Morgan, his wife, for providing me with some more personal aspects to help with this introduction. Let me begin by making it very clear that Walter is a true Southerner. There's no question that he has met the residency and practice location requirements for membership in this association. He was born in Montgomery, but really grew up in a small town in southern Alabama known as Andalusia. And I understand that sometimes when asked where he's from, he'd say he's from Erle, lower Alabama. Here's Walter at age 4 in Andalusia. This photo, which I understand is his mom's favorite, shows Walter on the right and his close buddy and his first cousin William. Turns out that the two of them had decided to run away from home in their pajamas. Evidently, they did notify his mom, who packed them a lunch, and asked them to pose for a picture to remember them by. But I think by the time they reached the end of the driveway, they changed their mind. Now, although there's a strong resemblance, this is not Walter. This is Walter's father, Walter Oliver Merrill. Turns out that Walter's dad was a gifted football player and a 3-year starter at the University of Alabama, who contributed to an SEC championship and a trip to the Rose Bowl in 1938. Following college, his dad was drafted into the NFL and played professional football for 3 years with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Brooklyn Dodgers then was a football team. Walter's father is currently up for election to the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame. Sadly, however, Walter's dad died in 1953 from complications of heart disease when Walter was only 5. And as such, Walter did not have much time to get to know his father, but clearly became very close to his mother and his sister. And here are the three of them this past year celebrating his mother's 90th birthday. As I mentioned, Walter grew up in Andalusia, but when his mother remarried, they moved down to Pensacola, where Walter spent his high school days. Now, one thing you may not have known about Walter was his musical aptitude. It turns out he played in a band while in high school. This is the Vandells. I think you can identify which one was Walter. And here's the handsome young man in his senior year photograph. Following high school, he chose the University of South, that's better known as Sewanee, for college. And here he is, a big man on campus. I didn't realize he had early concerns about our environment. Now, Walter clearly inherited his athletic ability from his dad. He played football, of course, in high school, and he played football all 4 years while he was at Sewanee. Walter clearly wanted to go to medical school, and following college, he was accepted at Johns Hopkins, where he spent 4 years as a medical student and then was fortunate to achieve a surgical residency there. Here we see an enthusiastic intern who would later become a confident chief resident. During his training at Hopkins, Walter spent 2 years at the NIH in the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and that is when I first met him. When he finished his training at Hopkins, he spent an additional fellowship as a registrar in London at Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children. Walter's great training and enormous potential landed him a job at Vanderbilt, where he began his productive career in 1983. Walter's career prospered at Vanderbilt, where he rose to full professorship in 9 years and took on multiple leadership roles. By 2002, his accomplishments and leadership capabilities led to his recruitment to be the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at the University of Cincinnati. And in 2009, he moved to Jackson, Mississippi to take over the reins of the cardiothoracic surgery program there. And just this year, he was offered the position of chief of staff at Vanderbilt University Hospital, which he happily accepted to return to home and family. This is his trail over the past decade. During Walter's career, his contributions have been multiple and significant. His CV is packed, as is indicated here. But Walter he's not all work and no play. Fishing has been a love of his since childhood. Here he is at age 8 after a successful day of fishing off the Gulf Coast. Here he is salmon fishing in Alaska and bone fishing in Mexico. And here he's showing off his catch with his fishing buddy, his colleague, his mentor, and a former Southern Thoracic president, Harvey Bender. Walter has had great success in his career and his pastime, but none of that has preempted his dedication to his family. I already indicated his closeness to his mother and sister. He was also fortunate to find a supportive partner in life. Here are Walter and Morgan as they walked out of the church on their wedding day. And they've been blessed with 4 children. From left to right is Kelly, Mary Knox, Hilson, and Gibson. And here is the family together at their house in Suwanee with Mary Knox's husband, Matthew. And here are Matthew and Mary Knox with Oliver, the first grandchild named after Walter's dad. So here's the list. I couldn't verify the first, but I can vouch for the rest. This is what makes a president of the Southern Thoracic Surgical Association. It's my pleasure to present Dr. Walter Merrill.
Members of the Southern Thoracic Surgical Association and guests, it is an honor to stand before you this morning. I am grateful for the kind introduction by Erle Austin. He has been generous in purposefully overlooking most of my faults and shortcomings. I'm reminded of the words of Winston Churchill, who, when speaking of another person, could well have been speaking of me when he described a modest little person with much to be modest about. I'm thankful for the opportunity you have afforded me this past year. It's been a wonderful and meaningful experience to serve as your president. I wish to acknowledge and give special thanks to the current staff, council, committee members, and others who have been so helpful to me and have been instrumental in moving the agenda of this special organization forward. I would be remiss if I did not also remember before you the remarkable contributions of former members of our support staff, especially those of Nancy Puckett, Katie Bohannick, and Joyce Gambino. There are many things that I owe to numerous people. One of my favorite sayings concerns the importance of choosing your parents carefully. Of course, that is not possible, but I am most fortunate, as has been pointed out by Erle, to be one of the offspring of 2 wonderful parents. And although my father died when I was quite young, I have felt his constant presence in my life, and my mother continues to be an amazing source of inspiration, wisdom, and love. I am also fortunate to have a fantastic sister who has been supportive of me over the years. And I cannot say enough about the tolerance, understanding, and steadfast love that have been showered upon me by my wife Morgan, our 4 wonderful children, and all the members of my extended family. To those mentioned especially, and to countless friends, colleagues, mentors, coaches, teachers, domestic workers, students, residents, patients and patients' families, and so many others, I am deeply indebted to you and eternally grateful. Without the love and support of all these people, nothing would have been possible. Surely nothing would have been accomplished, and no aspect of the journey would have been worthwhile. All of us face the problem of information overload and the need constantly to be wired, to be in touch, responsive to numerous concerns, frequently simultaneously. This is a heavy burden, and it is tempting, as T.S. Eliot wrote, to be distracted from distraction by distraction. What is the antidote? Let me suggest that one possible solution is, from time to time, to turn off your computers, beepers, and cell phones. Sit still. Set aside a few moments for quiet reflection. I am hopeful we can accomplish that this morning, for a quiet mind leads to clearer and sharper listening and hearing and a deepening of perception. Sometimes, through this process of reflection, unexpected connections become apparent, and one is able to recognize deeper patterns of meaning. Our annual meeting brings us together as a body to celebrate scholarship, fellowship, and service. Similar to many other professional societies, the meeting continues to maintain the tradition of a presidential address. While one can argue whether or not such an activity is necessary or a good idea, it does afford your president the opportunity to stand here before you and to utilize the bully pulpit, which is generally considered a first-rate opportunity to speak on almost any topic. I am hopeful that this presentation will be seen as an affirming discussion of our mutually held core beliefs, and that it will invoke higher principles for all of us to consider. It is my goal to remind us of our shared sense of obligation to the past and our collective responsibility to the future. Who do you say you are? Today I am posing a question, actually several questions. We are a people who tend to search for answers. We thrive on experimentation, the scientific process, and empiricism. Much of life can be viewed as a quest to find the answers to those questions. While I support broad utilization of the scientific method and all the collective efforts to find answers to questions, I have decided that it is more interesting and perhaps more rewarding and possibly more important to spend time thinking about what are the key questions. Recall the wisdom expressed in this familiar saying: the answer you get depends on the question you ask. It requires courage to struggle through the formulation of tough questions, as one has to be prepared for whatever answers might be discovered. The key is to be open to exploring new possibilities. So I request that you stand with me and help me struggle a bit today with the concept of trying not to find or declare answers, but to work through and examine an effort to pose questions. I am going to focus the questions only on a limited spectrum concerning various aspects of our lives. Due to the constraints of time, many important considerations will have to be ignored today. To borrow Lincoln's phrase, I am choosing to dwell on topics that I consider to be related to the better angels of our nature. You might ask, what are some of the inspirations behind this effort at question asking? One of the most powerful examples of an effort to pose a question in just the right way comes from the words of Robert F. Kennedy. He said, "There are those who look at things the way they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. Another source of inspiration is drawn from Socrates, who told us the unexamined life is not worth living. Perhaps by that statement he meant that all persons should question their desires, customs, habits, and beliefs, and everyone should pursue opportunities for reflection, assessment, and the asking of questions. This is an attempt to dig a bit deeper, to try to look at things through another lens. Perhaps we might indulge, if only for a little while, in a different way of seeing our surroundings and our place within them. Let us explore and use the faculties of imagination, intuition, and wonder. Get away from the typical focus on reason and facts and think about meaning. Consider the comments of Roy Porter in The Greatest Benefit to Mankind. He says, "Neither do we know anything concrete about most of the medical encounters that have ever been. The historical record is like the night sky. We see a few stars and group them into mythic constellations, but what is chiefly visible is the darkness." Think about that for a moment. It's an important point, which I will repeat. We see a few stars and group them into mythic constellations, but what is chiefly visible is the darkness. It is only when we pause and take the time for a deeper look, then we begin to get a glimpse of what lies beyond our usual scope of vision. We must learn to see not only with our eyes, but also with our hearts, so that we might discover what is truly essential. Along with this new way of seeing, we must learn to embrace mystery and develop an affinity for probing its secrets and holding it in dynamic tension with what is known or certain. Think about the experience of the photographer DeWitt Jones when he was walking in a field trying to find something of beauty to photograph. He was filled with disappointment that the wildflowers were not only well past their peak, but were, in fact, dead. He was looking for outward and obvious manifestations of visible beauty, and he had to see it first in order to confirm it and believe that it was present. Then, in a moment of inspiration, he reoriented his thinking. He realized something profound. All of a sudden, he understood the secret of discovering beauty. If I believe it, I will see it. When Abraham Lincoln delivered his Gettysburg Address, he predicted, incorrectly, that the world will little note nor long remember what we say here. Unlike his immortal speech, much of what is said today will soon be forgotten. While some might say that is regrettable, nonetheless, perhaps all is not lost. My hope is, in these few minutes, while we pause together to reflect and attempt to look closer and deeper, you will feel something, and that somehow this discussion will help you to connect with your innermost feelings, with your inner sense of self. Maybe Maya Angelou was correct when she said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Or to put it another way, consider Malcolm Gladwell's comment. It succeeds or fails on the strength of its ability to engage you, to make you think, to give you a glimpse into someone else's head, even if in the end you conclude that someone else's head is not a place you'd really like to be. At the end of the day, what I have to offer is not nearly as important as the ongoing efforts that I hope each of you will engage yourselves in, which is to think about the questions that you want to pose as you go forward in your respective lives. After all, the real interest is not in what is said here today, but in the responses of you, the members of the audience, and your future efforts to ask questions. The idea is that each of us should attempt to arrive at, through contemplation and formulating questions, a comprehensive and coherent articulation of sensibility, which would help us to see ourselves and the world and our places in it in new ways, and which would have us live out our lives in the light of that vision. Who do you say you are? Notice that the question is not the usual one so frequently asked, what do you do? Rather, the what is replaced by who, and the do is replaced by are. The question, who do you say you are, asks us to consider more than the work and other activities that we are engaged in and the responsibilities to which we answer. It suggests to us that we need to go beyond the common practice of equating who we are with what we do. It allows us to focus on the fact that we, every one of us, are commonly engrossed in the busyness of life, whether we are cardiothoracic surgeons or engaged in other things. When we pause and take time to reflect, that then we understand that we must concern ourselves not only with all of that busyness, but also an awareness of history, sensitivity to place, respect for the natural order, acknowledgement of and coming to grips with our human limitations, and a commitment to honorable conduct in every respect. What we are doing is pursuing our vocation, which is not to say a goal, but rather listening to and responding to our calling. William Osler says, "The practice of medicine is an art, not a trade, a calling, not a business, a calling in which your heart will be exercised equally with your head. To you, as the trusted family counselor, the father will come with his anxieties, the mother with her hidden griefs, the daughter with her trials, and the son with his follies." Where are you going? We are all in the midst of a journey or pilgrimage. For hundreds, if not thousands of years, people have made pilgrimages, traveling to some far-off land, making a physical journey that adds subtly to the efforts to complete the inner journey. Pilgrimages are made as acts of penance or acts of thanksgiving or attempts to obtain supernatural assistance. There is the attraction of the end of the journey or destination, the mysterious pull of a holy place. It is natural to focus one's mind and effort on arriving at the intended destination and to give far less attention to the process and all that is involved in moving from where one is to where one wishes to go. While having a goal in mind can be useful, it can also lead one to ignore the beauty and the overall importance of the journey itself. Simply put, the challenge is to focus less on the future and more on the here and now, to give ourselves over to the beauty and joy of the present moment, to concern ourselves with the being rather than the doing. The hope of achieving a transcendent experience may well be accomplished anywhere along the journey, at various times, in various places, and not necessarily at the point of destination. We seek perfection, but recall the beauty of Chinese art, which always intentionally contains a flaw to remind us that humanity is fallible. What is our journey about? Do we believe what Shakespeare said through the voice of Macbeth, that each of us is a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more? It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Consider, if you will, an alternative point of view. John Mason Brown tells us that life owes us little. We owe it everything. The only true happiness comes from squandering ourselves for a purpose. The journey that we tread involves a confluence of past, present, and future. There is a notion of duality as we perceive darkness and light, strength and weakness, limitations and possibilities, the inner and the outer experience, the journey and the destination. Yet all is one. There is a mysterious unity in all of this experience if we can only merge the mind and the heart, grow toward integration, and dissolve the barriers that separate us from ourselves and from others. T.S. Eliot spoke to this issue of journey and meaning and discovery of truth. He said, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." How do we move forward? Sometimes the road ahead seems relatively straightforward and simple, as exemplified in the wisdom of Yogi Berra, who advised that when one encounters a fork in the road, one should simply take it. However, things are not always that clean and neat, and the way forward can be perplexing. Consider a multicursal maze where one encounters choice, confusion, and doubt. It is at moments such as these that we have to dig down within ourselves and call upon our deepest reservoirs of strength, confidence, and willingness to push forward despite uncertainty. What would you do if you were not afraid? Let us not forget that fear drives behavior. We start out with dreams and considerations of possibilities, but these are taken over by doubt and practicality. The tendency is to stay within our comfort zones with a rationalization that by so doing we will stay safe. Some would say that this practice only serves to keep us small, not safe. The solution for combating fear is to attempt to defy the impossible, to go forward with passion, determination, collaboration, insight, and faith. Are you willing to take on the mantle of leadership? We are made for community, so leadership is everyone's vocation. In a close-knit community, everyone follows and everyone leads. Václav Havel tells us that authentic leaders in every setting aim at liberating the heart, their own and others. Leadership implies the power to project either shadow or light. How do we care for our patients? We live in an era of fantastic advances with an unprecedented amount of information available to us in textbooks, video recordings, various computer-based platforms, etc. The technological tools that we have at our disposal are phenomenal. All of this is good, as we have the ability to bring this information and these technological tools into the laboratory to make further discoveries and to the bedside and clinics to treat our patients. However, there are dangers associated with the current state of affairs. It has been stated that medicine is no longer the laying on of hands. It is more like the reading of signals from machines. If we are not careful, the use of technology can supplant taking the time to sit still and talk to patients. We must remember the art and the power of listening and touching. Let's pause for a moment and examine Sir Luke Field's painting, The Doctor. Field's eldest son, Philip, died on Christmas morning, 1877. He was attended by Dr. Merrill, who impressed Fields with his care and attention to the dying child, and who became a symbol of professional devotion. The painting was commissioned by Henry Tate, who subsequently founded the Tate Gallery in London. Fields said that he wanted to put on record the status of the doctor in our own time. The painting tells a story and tells it with great depth of feeling and honesty. It clearly points out the limitations of the physician. He has administered some medication, but it does not appear to be effective. The child remains severely ill, and the parents in the background continue to be concerned and apprehensive. Most likely this has gone on all night, as the early rays of dawn are just beginning to appear through the window. Despite the length of time spent with the child, the physician is still intently gazing at her. He is focused on one and only one thing, the patient. The light on the table and the position of the doctor and patient lead us to comb down our vision and focus attention on the essential drama of medicine, which is the creation of a relationship or bond between the doctor and the patient. This relationship is depicted by the one central action depicted, which is attention. Remember the words of Dr. Francis Peabody. The good physician knows his patients through and through, and his knowledge is bought dearly. Time, sympathy, and understanding must be lavishly dispensed, but the reward is to be found in that personal bond which forms the greatest satisfaction of the practice of medicine. One of the essential qualities of the clinician is interest in humanity, for the secret of the care of the patient is in caring for the patient. What are your sacred spaces? These can be defined as discrete places with a specified geography, but they can also be defined as those events in life that lift us up from wherever we are to our highest calling. It is interesting to note that these are shared spaces, which implies the importance of community in our lives. Do you experience that special sense of magic and mystery when you are at the patient's bedside? Is each patient interaction, in effect, a sacred space, not just another encounter? If one pursues this line of thinking, then acts of service are placed within a spiritual perspective. Doing so does not, in any way, diminish the special education, training, and extraordinary skills that are necessary to care for patients. On the other hand, considering acts of service within a spiritual perspective provides a richer sense of who we are and allows unique talents and qualities to come forth more reliably. Remember that opportunities for service abound and can be found anywhere. Service does not require special places or circumstances. We just need to be conscious and aware of the need for service, then do the best we can to fulfill those needs. Let me remind you how Dr. Dwight Magoon viewed our work. He said, "All efforts in research, education, administration, writing, editing, and long hours of intensive labor at the operating table have inherent and transcendent value only in one respect. as an unselfish expression of concern for the welfare of needful human beings. Illness strips away the outer veneer of guile and reveals the vulnerability of patients. They frequently exhibit openness, courage, perseverance, patience, acceptance, dignity, and sometimes humor. Let us be moved and touched by the exhibition of these qualities and reaffirm our common humanity. However it can be accomplished, we should develop an appreciation of the fact that we are witnesses to something profound and wonderful, something hard to describe and hard to understand, yet we know something is happening. It is a mystery. Without a doubt, it is troubling to be pulled out of our comfort zones and made to confront the limitations of our knowledge and abilities and technology. Our natural tendency is to seek to be knowledgeable and confident and self-assured. It is difficult to do, but we must learn to acknowledge that we do not understand everything we have experienced, yet we stand together in the truth of our uncertainty. Some of the most profound and moving experiences anyone can encounter occur at the bedside, at the time of death, with family members in attendance. When a patient dies, especially following a prolonged illness, a terrible sadness is encountered. At the same time, there can be a sense of gladness that suffering has come to a final end. There may be anger that some terrible tragedy has happened, a life spent. Those who love the patient may experience feelings of guilt related to unfinished business. By being fully present in the moment, one experiences a deep sense of empathy for all involved in caring for the patient. There is a feeling of awe and wonder, searching for an explanation that you don't have. It requires time and patience to be there, to take it all in, to process it. Doing so can be painful, yet it brings great rewards. Most of the time, one comes away with a sense of peace of mind, a sense of intimacy that is hard to understand, hard to describe. Somehow, being there and processing it all leads to an appreciation of life in all of its struggle, even in the presence of such pains. What are your concerns regarding the future of medicine? I'm reminded of the comments made many years ago by a former colleague, Dr. Gottlieb Friesinger. His response to the question was both simple and profound. He said, "I am not concerned regarding the future. There will always be opportunities in one form or another for scholarship and for service. Our task and our good fortune is to go forward, sharing the road with devoted and capable colleagues, bringing many different gifts and perspectives to walk the path together, to represent something good to a world that needs what we have to give, to see lying before us new calls, new growth, new hope, new possibilities. What we are about is to nurture human freedom in the service of the human community, which is a celebration of love. After all, the reward of service to others is the opportunity not only to help relieve suffering, but also to grow in wisdom, to experience a greater sense of unity, to be refreshed so that we can carry on. Helping others can be difficult as they make demands on us. Their reactions may be unpredictable, and we may be reminded of our own inadequacies and vulnerability. We also must contend with our own inertia and move forward, opening ourselves to the ambiguity of the unknown and learning new roles. How wide is your tent? Who will you allow to sit under it with you? We face conflict, discord, disagreement, every one of us, every day. It is commonplace to consider who is right, who is wrong. It is natural to pay attention to and to emphasize our differences. The differences in appearance, background, attitudes, interests, and beliefs are easy to spot. It is difficult to engage in meaningful dialogue with those with whom we disagree and attempt to discover whether or not there are points of agreement or some middle ground that might be achieved. The commonalities that bind us together are frequently hard to perceive. What is the solution? Let us consider the admonition of E.M. Forster in Howard's End. Only connect the prose and the passion, and both will be exalted, and human love will be seen at its height. Live in fragments no longer. Only connect. Due to the contributions of others, we are able to glimpse a more distant horizon and to contemplate the future with hope and confidence and a clearer understanding of its opportunities and possibilities. One can argue that the path is clear. However, we need to see where things are less clear, and we must have the courage to sometimes get lost so that we might unexpectedly arrive at a place different from the one we had sought. We are indeed shaped by the past. Experiences from the past have formed us and have led us to where we are today. The past has imposed upon us a particular burden and responsibility to learn from these experiences, to build upon them, and to see in all human triumphs and tragedies of those times intimations of our own mortal, imperfect human nature. From all that, we should go forward to fashion the future with all its hopes, dreams, aspirations, and purposes. We need to be about strength and stability, cultivating true learning and virtue. How shall education be conducted? We are the custodians of a tradition. Teaching the art and science of medicine and that of other disciplines has been going on for thousands of years. It is a form of re-gifting or paying it forward. In all educational endeavors, not just those related to medicine, we must create that safe place, as Alexis de Tocqueville stated, where the instruction that enlightens the understanding is not separated from the education that amends the heart. We must undertake an examination of ideas with great candor and civility as a part of challenging and questioning and defending and responding. We must engage in the incessant pursuit of truth, which is, frustratingly, never quite fully revealed, never wholly discerned, but in fragmentary and fleeting moments sensed, hinted at, approached, approximated. As my friend and colleague Dr. John Tarpley says, we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. Education is all about turning the heart and spirit so as to hear possibilities of various forms of life in which we might participate. It shows us details and patterns and relations which we would not have seen or heard for ourselves. The way forward can be summarized by the comments of W.B. Yeats. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. What are you looking for? Many of us, I think, are continuously trying to find and create meaningful connections. We all want to live lives that in the end seem to matter. How does one accomplish this? Malcolm Gladwell tells us that we should dignify the transaction of everyday life by granting them meaning. Above all else, we should search for what Thomas Merton calls true self, to become that person that we were created to be. While we tend to focus on the optimistic side and emphasize strength, ability, and accomplishment, at the same time, somehow, we also have to embrace the weakness, liability, and the darkness as a part of who we are. We develop fear of the natural chaos of life, but life is messy, and the way forward may be hard to discern. Remember the previous example of the multicursal maze. A broader view indicates that chaos is a precondition to creativity. It contains not just danger, but also opportunity. Every creation myth relates the story that life emerged from the void. It is necessary to recognize that our lives reflect loss and gain, darkness and light, struggle and joy. We should embrace it all and find in all of it opportunities for growth. Our culture prefers thinking in terms of either or, rather than delving into the complexities of paradox. In paradox, opposites do not negate one another, rather they cohere in a mysterious unity at the heart of reality. What is the danger involved in what we are doing? Without a doubt, there are many challenges and numerous possible answers to this question. Let us think about the following proposition. Our natural tendency is to focus on the beginning and the ending times of our lives. There is great excitement associated with a new birth and great sorrow associated with the ending of a life. It is easy to overlook the importance of what happened during the dash between those years. It is there, within the dash, that the entire journey occurs. All the experiences accumulated and plays out. Even when one focuses on the dash and everything that was a part of it, the tendency is to emphasize certain events, milestones, accomplishments, and disappointments. While this is understandable, one cannot overlook the importance of addressing the purpose and meaning of these life events. Perhaps it was all a matter of coincidence. Consider the possibility that there are no coincidences. As T.S. Eliot says, we had the experience but missed the meaning. And approach to the meaning restores the experience in a different form, beyond any meaning we can assign to happiness. If you were alone on an island in the middle of the ocean and you could send only one message, what would it say? We are moved by the desire to be engaged in service. This is what we are all about. We accumulate knowledge and experience to help us in our service work. We must avoid the trap of getting caught up in the search for answers, more knowledge, more facts, to support a particular way of looking at things or to refine a certain point of view. In the midst of all that pursuit, actual helping can slip through the cracks and be overlooked. The pursuit of knowledge, skill, and experience is a worthy goal, but it is wisdom, which is defined here as understanding and professing and practicing our common humanity that we need. By being a dedicated member of any of the helping professions, we can set ourselves apart from those who need our help. This is the trap of separateness and division. This difference must be resolved, as the only real thing is helping, not the division. It's an interesting observation, and I hope one that will prove to be thought-provoking, how at one moment helper and helped can be strangers, then somehow they become linked as partners on a journey involving amazingly personal and intimate moments. Why are you here? Perhaps the question is partially answered by the pursuit of truth. Remember that in John's Gospel we are told, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." Perhaps the question is partially answered by the pursuit of opportunities to serve others. Recall the joy of service, the privilege of rising each day to do the best we can. It is a remarkable experience to be able to participate in these sacrificial acts. One is both a gift giver and a gift receiver. It seems complicated and difficult, yet the truth is we get to participate in the singular grace of being an instrument of love. Let me suggest a few summary thoughts. Be mindful of and responsive to your passions. Set aside time for rest, contemplation, and reflection. Prepare yourself and watch so that when the moment comes, you will be well equipped and ready to respond to your calling. Keep your heart open so that love can flow in and out. Align yourself with those who are searching for the truth. Be wary of anyone who claims to have found it. And finally, heed and respond over and over to the questions that you will formulate and to this one: who do you say you are? Thank you again for the great honor of serving as your president this year. I am grateful to you for this opportunity. I am hopeful that during my time of service, I have paid attention to the wisdom of the poets, who for ages have taught us that office means obligation, not privilege, and that the power of office imposes not prerogative, but rather responsibility. As I reflect on this process of leave-taking, I am reminded of Paul's letter to the Corinthians. In it, he says, "If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal." Let us go forward, speaking the language and doing the work of love. I will close with the words of W.B. Yeats. Think where man's glory most begins and ends, and say my glory was I had such friends. Thank you.